Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible teaching snippet of the day. I'm running a little bit late today, but you'll notice I'm sitting here on a patio. I'm in Woodland Park, Colorado. I'll be teaching publicly. We finally found us a building. The small 12 or 15 group turned into 50, and we had to go out and try to find a building today and get that set up so we can meet in public. So now it's a public meeting. I posted the information on this Facebook page. I'll be teaching tomorrow night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. And if you're in the Woodland Park area, you're welcome to come. The times as well as the location is right there. You're welcome to join us. I'll be teaching about healing as well as some other subjects. I'll be laying hands on the sick and ministering healing as well. So let me get started on our teaching snippet today. I want to talk a little bit more about the tithe, and I really want to talk more about the church system. That's what I hope you understand that I'm doing. I'm questioning the church system and what it's mutated out to be. We've created a big beast of a system that takes $100 bills to keep it going. We have, over the years, started buying land and buildings and nice furniture and sound equipment and building gymnasiums and paying huge salaries, not just to a pastor. I'm talking clergy, the leaders, the heads of denominations. It's just money, money, money. It takes billions. Did you hear what I just said? Billions of dollars to run the church system. Guys, that ought not to be, because that is absolutely not what you will see in church history. That is not how it was in the New Testament churches that was meeting in homes. People were not buying fancy buildings. They were meeting house to house every single day and all of that. And I'm going to talk about that in another teaching snippet about how the New Testament churches operated and compare our church system to the New Testament churches that the apostles set up. And I hope I'll bring some clarity to that. But I'm going to say this again today, though. Did you know I am not against the church? I am not against leadership. I'm not against pastors. And I am not against people giving. I am against us having big churches being in debt. Okay? I am not comfortable with one man being the superstar on stage, because there's a lot of pressure on that person. And it's just not the way it is in the Bible. It was an eldership system, not a one-man system of leadership. And the tithe, what I keep teaching about the tithe, there is no such thing as a tithe in the New Testament. There is no such thing. There's no such thing as a tithe of money to a church, period. The Old Covenant tithe, the Mosaic law, it was always food, never money. It was always food, never money. And it was never given to a church to pay church bills and salaries. It was taken to a storehouse so that the widows and the homeless, the orphans, and even the Levite priesthood could have food to eat. It was never money. Jesus said that money is the root of all evil. And it also says that a man's heart is deceitful. Now watch. When we start bringing money in and making it about money, and it makes the wolves come in from among, and they're living among us. They don't love the sheep. They're here for the money. Jesus talked about that. He said that the hireling, the shepherds, that word shepherd means pastor, would come in and they would work for money and they would get paid and they would abandon the sheep, okay? So, see, Jesus was saying that when you start paying and pull money into a system, because it's the root of all evil, it can easily be the downfall of people, because our hearts will mislead us. And I believe that there's good people in our church system that believe that the tithe is biblical, because number one, their salaries and their livelihood depends on that money coming in. And it's not just their income for themselves. They owe so much money to banks that they just have to teach the tithe so people feel responsible, so they'll give the money. Why are we putting ourselves and the people of God in so much bondage and under a false system of tithing that was never in the Old Testament, and it's never in the New Testament, and no one ever taught it for us to do it? Did you know in the United States that the tithe was never collected till the 1900s? And then it was just in different little places. It wasn't even throughout the entire church system. What happened as people started buying land and buildings and going into debt for them, that's when people started teaching that the tithe was required because they had bills to pay and needed to enforce people giving. Okay, so what I want to talk about again, though, is about us not being under the Mosaic Law. There were 613 of those laws, which included the food tithe of landowners. I should say that again, too. The only people that tithed food into the storehouse to feed other people who could not get their own food and feed themselves, they were landowners who had crops or cattle or some type of livestock. It was crops and livestock. It was never money, and it always had people, they had to own land, okay? Now, by the time Jesus got here, had they manipulated the system to include a temple tax where people had to put money into boxes, metal boxes that made noise? Absolutely. But that was not a tithe. That was a temple tax offering, where people offering boxes, not a tithe. It was never a tithe, because look, the Pharisees and the scribes couldn't take the money if they called it a tithe, because the only people that could take a tithe is the Levite priesthood. So the reason they called it a temple tax of money being brought into the church or the temple is so that they could get their greedy hands on it. Because if they called it a tithe, they couldn't take any of it. They couldn't touch it, okay? And so, again, I'm going to say it. There's no such thing as a tithe of money to a church. A tithe is always food offered by a landowner of crops or their livestock, and it was given to people and put in a storehouse, the food for people to eat. Okay, now let me just go back again. You know, we've created this beast of a system that requires us to get money from people so we can pay the bank note and the equipment note and the salaries. This ought not be. This is not how the New Testament churches was established by the apostles. But I want to talk about and show you one more place to prove to you that we are not under the Mosaic Law. And most people don't want to be under the 613 laws of the Mosaic covenant, the Old Covenant, because we know we can't keep them. But we will resurrect the tithe and preach it because we want people to give money to a church system so bills can be paid. But I want to show you where us as New Covenant believers, Gentiles, are not under the Mosaic Law. So let's get started on that, and I'm going to go over to Acts chapter 15. And this is where some Gentiles, the Gentiles are people born outside of the Abrahamic bloodline. They are not of the 12 tribes, okay? So we are Gentiles, okay? So these Gentiles in Antioch become believers. And some of the what they're called Judaizers come along and start telling them that making Jesus their Lord isn't good enough, that they've got to do more than that, and they have to be circumcised physically, cut, and they also have to obey, follow, and keep the Mosaic Law. And that's what we are talking about and it's not just circumcision. It is very clear, and it says, and charge them to obey and follow the Mosaic Law, okay, the laws of Moses. So they have this big meeting. Paul and Barnabas come, and they have a big church meeting. And James, Jesus' half-brother, is one of the leaders of the Jerusalem Council over the New Testament church. So they're there, and in Acts chapter 15, verse 5, I'm going to just read this. But some who believed and acknowledged Jesus as their Savior and devoted themselves to Jesus belonged to the sect of the Pharisees. And they rose up and said, it is necessary to circumcise the Gentile converts and to charge them to obey and follow the law of Moses. And the apostles and elders were assembled together to look into and consider the matter. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to skip down and read in Acts chapter 22, and it says here, and the apostles and the elders together with the whole assembly, the church, resolved to select men from around among their number and send them to Antioch with Paul, and Barnabas. And they chose leading men among the brethren and sent them. And they went and sent with them the following letter. And the brethren, both the apostles and elders, to the brethren, so this is the letter, it's saying from the apostles and the elders to the brethren, the Gentiles, in Antioch and Syria and Sicily, greetings. And it says, as we have heard that some persons of our number from among us have disturbed you with their teaching, unsettling your minds and throwing you into confusion, although we gave them no express orders or instructions, it has been resolved by us in assembly to select men and send them as messengers to you, along with our beloved Barnabas and Paul. So they've sent Barnabas and Paul and some other men with this letter. And this is what the letter tells the new covenant Gentile believers. And this is their decision, whether or not they had to be circumcised and whether they fell under the old Mosaic covenant and had to obey all of the laws. Now listen, because you're a Gentile, this will answer whether you're under the Mosaic law. For it has seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us not to lay upon you any greater burden than these indispensable requirements, that you abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, and from tasting blood or drinking blood from animals, and from eating the meat of animals that has been strangled, because when you strangle an animal, the blood doesn't drain out of them, so okay, and from sexual impurity. If you keep yourselves from these things, you will do well. Fare well and be strong. Okay. The reason they said this to the believers in Antioch is because they were being told that they had to obey all 613 laws of the Mosaic covenant. And they wrote this letter to tell the new covenant Gentile believers, no, you are not under the Mosaic law. You do not have to keep these 613 laws, and you do not have to be circumcised. And what they were saying here is that in this area, these people were known for doing a lot of sacrifices to idols, the Greek gods and stuff, and that they would strangle the animals in that sacrifice, and they were very, very sexually immoral, and that's why they wrote them this. But did you notice that the Jerusalem Council, the leaders, did not say, yes, you are under the Mosaic law, and yes, you will be circumcised, and yes, you will pay tithe, and you will send it back to headquarters? They didn't say any of that. In fact, they told them what minimum that they would require. So guys, I'm going to sign off. I love you, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.